Hello, everybody. This is Impromptu. This is Lorraine Alternative Homesteading. It is September 10, 2024, approximately 6:30 p.m. Eastern Time. I don't have a lot of phone space, so I decided to come on here and read a little bit more of this book since a lot of people appear to be interested. I just wanted to give you a heads up that this book, The Criminal Fraternity Servants of the Lie, by Saul Esprit, servant of the truth, Jesus Christ, it appears to be no longer available. And when I purchased it, it was $35, so it was a little bit pricey. It's a hardcover book, but I'm going to start reading. So, once I get through the chapters, if I see that somebody's in the chat, I'll respond to you. So I see that there's one person here. Welcome. This is very impromptu. I'm going to continue reading the book I started to read when my phone crapped out because I don't have enough space on the phone. So I left off at the bottom of page 5, and that's where I'm going to continue. In the final analysis, thinking individuals who are spiritually capable of knowing the truth will come to the unavoidable conclusion that human civil government is the enemy, and all government officials are the terrorists. The person whose allegiance is fully established in the Lord Jesus Christ and not with Lucifer's tyrannical beast government system of human oppression and slavery will remain faithful to God by rejecting and steadfastly resisting the devil and his servants. James 4:7. And his government kingdoms, Luke 4:5-6. Consequently, they will obey God and oppose the criminal fraternity, for we are to obey God rather than men. September 11, 2001. Okay, this is a touchy subject. Hi, Billy. I'm continuing the reading of The Criminal Fraternity. This is an introduction to the real terrorists. We know who they are, the ones who think that we are, but it's merely a projection. And this book is written in 2014 by Saul Esprit, Esprit. I don't know if it's available anymore. It's no longer available on Amazon. I purchased it about a year ago. The reason I purchased it is it was recommended to me by the author who messaged me on Quora. And he said, to read this book. So I bought it immediately. I looked at it, bought it, hadn't read it, was looking for it. I thought it was stolen, found it, started to read it, and it really is appropriate. It's rare. I know. I was just going to say it is rare. It's a rare book. They don't want anybody knowing about this book. And yes, I am reading it. Well, so now this is evidence, right? It's evidence that I'm reading this book. I own the book. I have the Amazon receipt that I purchased this book, and it is no longer available on Amazon. When I purchased it, it was $35. Now, I normally don't spend that much money on books anymore. I try to keep a cap of around $25 and even try to go a little bit lower than that and buy used books. But every so often, a book becomes available that you have to have, and it's new, and you can't find a used copy. You just have to buy it, and it's going to be that way with Dr. Robert Duncan's books. So I highly recommend, if anybody's interested in purchasing his book, to just buy it before it disappears. So I'm going to continue reading here. And yeah, this book, I've got two good books. I've got The Fall of the FBI. They're not going to like if I start to read that book. So we'll hold that book for another time. Everybody knows that they're done, But anyway, so, and I don't even know if I'm even allowed to talk about this date, but September 11, 2001, he goes on to say in this book, and this date is embedded in my mind because the night before, I attended a concert with my daughter at Madison Square Garden. It was Michael Jackson and the Jackson 5. and there was like everybody imaginable was there. Britney Spears, Usher, um, um, Elizabeth Taylor, just um, I think it was Beyonce. There were just so many people there. It was just crazy, crazy. We had the best time. It was in the torrential pouring rain. And then I come home, go to sleep, and I get woken up the next morning by my boyfriend at the time. And he's calling me from Israel because that's where he was working. You know, he traveled back and forth. No, he's not. He's not Israeli. He's a Baptist. um, he calls me up. He says, "Are you watching TV?" I said, "No, I'm not watching TV. Don't you remember I had a concert last night?" He says, "Well, you really need to turn on the TV." I said, "Well, why?" He said, "Just turn on the TV." So I turn on the TV, and I see this plane crashing into the World Trade Center. And I turned to him, I said, "How could they?" I mean, this is my mindset. How could they? How could that plane not see the World Trade Center? How could you like accidentally fly into a building that tall? Like that's where my mind was at. He said, "It wasn't an accident." I said, "What are you talking about?" And I'm half asleep and I'm watching and I'm like in disbelief, like I cannot believe what's happening. Well, anyway, I can't talk about that too much more. It's so disturbing to me. I lived through it. My daughter lived through it. Some of her friends' family died on that day. One of her friends had a birthday. It was her birthday that day. She goes to school, and then we get the message that the schools are locked down. They're not sending the kids home, et cetera, et cetera. And it turns out that that girl, her friends, who had a birthday on September 11, both of her parents died that day. So she will forever remember her birthday as being the most tragic day of her life. But anyway, I'm going to continue here because that's just a very sad story. So, yes, I'm going to keep the book. This is evidence that I have the book, evidence that I've got the book here. Upon learning of the fated incident that would later be compared in crisis intensity to FDR's planned attack of Pearl Harbor by the Japanese, this author immediately understood that the hijacked airliners flown into the World Trade Towers and allegedly the Pentagon was planned and carried out by the Illuminati cabal of the global SUPRA government. While the disinformation machine, newspapers, television, news, magazines, internet were cranked up and falling, running full speed to pump propaganda images into the vacuous gray matter of nearly all Americans, it was painfully obvious to some people that the quote unquote terrorists were and continue to be the hijacked federal government of the United States of America under the direction of the Illuminati world powers controlling the United Nations General Assembly. That realization represents the wide disparity which exists today between those who refuse to know the truth and the very few from whom the truth is the only thing worth knowing. One need merely ponder the fact that the Luciferian Brotherhood concocted a series of fabricated lies in order to cover up the true nature and intention of the most devastating incident thus far in American history. A falsehood so obvious and patently simplistic that a child could easily deduce what actually transpired. Yet, nearly 100% of the American people accepted the contrived official story of what occurred with open arms, a rictus of terror upon their wide eyed, deadpan faces. And this is exactly what the DC District of Criminals anticipated. The non critical thinking American people would play right into their hands. Were Arab, quote unquote, terrorists led by the infamous Osama bin Laden really behind most horrific acts of war ever perpetrated against the American people? Was Mr. Bin Laden really hiding out in a cave somewhere in the Middle East, fearing for his life? I thought that was, I'm sorry, I'm not a political person, but when I heard that, I thought that was the stupidest thing I ever did hear. That is what the Illuminati controlled press told the American public. That is what the CFR's talking heads, Dan Rather, Peter Jennings, Tom Brokaw, Brokaw, and Barbara Walters soberly announce on the evening news day after day, week in and week out, ad nauseum. And of course, for the TV mesmerized Americans, merely seeing and hearing an explanation on TV, any explanation whatsoever, is sufficient to convince them that it must be true. The drama was so obviously contrived that it was like an animated Disney production. The adult children of America are incapable of distinguishing fantasy from reality, lies from the truth. Their captive audience held spellbound by the synthetic reality flashing frame by frame before their glazed eyes. As this reader will soon discover in subsequent chapters, this epidemic lack of discernment is a curse from God. Second Thess, Thess, excuse me, because I've never read the Bible. A Second Thessalonians 2:10-12 is a definitive scripture. Because they received not the love of truth, that they might be saved. And for this cause God shall send them strong delusion, that they should believe a lie, that they all might be damned who believed not the truth, but had pleasure in unrighteousness. And actually, you can see how Neptune played a part in all this. Neptune is the outer planet of illusion, delusion, fantasy, drugs, alcohol. That's where you pull the wool over somebody's eyes with Neptune. For those who do not wish to know the truth, God cuts them off from knowing it, and they are sent to delusion, a demonic spirit of deceit, to ensure that they cannot perceive it, regardless of how obvious it may appear to others. God obliges spiritual cowards by allowing them to believe delusions. Isaiah 66:3-4. Yeah, they have chosen their own ways, and their soul delighteth in their abominations. I also will choose their delusions, and will bring their fears upon them. Today, an extremely small segment of the American public knows the truth about 9/11, or even cares to know it. All the rest have no interest in the truth and want nothing to do with it. It is because they don't want to know God, Jesus Christ, who is the truth. John 14:6. Therefore, in rejecting the truth, they reject Jesus Christ, the truth, God Himself. Even though widespread spiritual blindness is God's will for the people of America, I apologize about the roosters. They get ornery this time of the night. The criminal fraternity, I love that. I love that the criminal fraternity would like to take credit for America's terminal cognitive affliction, especially since it is they who are responsible for engineering the campaign to dumb down the American mind. For those few who can bear to know the truth, the following brief explanation is what actually took place before and on September 11, 2001. There were over 2,000 people in high government positions in America that had prior knowledge of the event. These were mostly upper level members of the CF Luciferian hierarchy. The finely orchestrated scenario culminated in the collision of planes into the Twin Towers, was planned 15 years in advance. Explosive devices were planted in the buildings and also in Building 7 and were set to go off upon impact, thus raising, R-A-Z-I-N-G, the massive structures to below ground level, a feat that otherwise would have been a physical engineering impossibility. And I just want to say on this, I have heard the testimony of engineers who have said the exact same thing. Although the LCF banned air traffic for several days after 9/11 occurred, unmarked UN aircraft continuously spewed toxic, those lines in the sky, in the air above sleepy Americans, increasing the volume and intensity of dumping wide swaths of aluminum dioxide, barium, pathogenic bacteria, viruses, infectious molds into the synthetically overcast sky, breathed into the lungs and deposited in brain tissue and other vital organs of the spellbound American people. The mind dumbing effect of the toxic cocktail mixture served to further zombify the nation into an unquestioning acceptance of the cover up lies to follow. Cheyenne Mountain NORAD air defense surveillance was shut down throughout the time of the 9/11 planned seizure of America. The commander of Norwood facility, General H. Estes the Third, is a known member of the global Illuminati. The government-sponsored terror was performed in order for UN Washington to justify subsequent unconstitutional legislative acts of tyranny that would immediately be passed through Congress. The anti terrorism legislation had been drafted prior to 9/11 and was ready for immediate implementation. This is the standard Hegelian dialectic used by dictators and despots. For centuries, order out of chaos, problem, reaction, solution. Thesis, antithesis, synthesis, and that tyrannical governments have historically implemented as a means to emotionally manipulate the masses to do the will of their Luciferian masters. Now, I just need to say for the record, this is for educational purposes only. I'm reading a book. I don't have an opinion on this. This is not my opinion. These are not my words. I'm merely reading a book for educational purposes. The global criminal fraternity's ultimate solution to the problem of terrorism, which they created, is to decree ever more oppressive laws designed to abolish citizens' constitutional rights and the creation of Machiavellian legislation to eradicate all Bill of Rights guaranteed freedoms. To cite only some examples of the legal criminal consequences emerging subsequent to 9/11 is gun confiscation laws, presidential executive orders to suspend the Constitution during declaration of martial law, FEMA concentration camps, refer to government document REX, REX 84, complete with barbed wire, gas chambers, and guillotines, deadly mandatory forced the jabby wabbies, promoted by the controlled media to protect citizens from the MCF's biowarfare agents. The Luciferian Brotherhood's ultimate goal is to number every person on Earth with a microchip embedded in their right hand, the mark of the beast, Revelation 13, 16, 17. Thus, by orchestrating a false flag, quote unquote, event, the global elites promoted 9/11 as a prelude to the physical and spiritual enslavement of the entire world. Now, I mean, we all know 9/11 is from what's 911? It's the emergency call. You know, you have an emergency. Who do you call? 911. And they use that day. You know how they love to use numbers. And you add 9, 1, 1, 9, 10, 11 is 11, right? As a prelude to the physical and spiritual enslavement of the entire world. All this and much, much more will be done and is presently being accomplished under the guise of quote unquote Homeland Security. Donna Summers. I believe that. I absolutely believe it. There's something called sick building syndrome also, where toxic mold builds up in the air conditioning ducts. They usually never cleaned in these buildings. You know, they let them go and, you know, the air conditioning turns on and the heat turns on and off and moisture gets in there and builds up and toxic mold blows throughout buildings. I believe that to be true. Let's see. Homeland Security. So, in the demonic controlled minds of the top world leaders, their solution of global government headed by their antichrist, Lucifer, Lucifer's imitation of the Son of God, Jesus Christ, is preceded by the creation of a problem, quote unquote, a catastrophic act of terror which they designed and carry out. It's sort of like our torture program. So they design particular programs. It appears that they design certain programs for all of the masses, and then they design another program for targeted people. The prelude to 9/11 was the 1993 World Trade Center explosion that was a failed attempt made by CIA government operatives who bungled the spurious Arab terrorist attack. 8 years later, using a similar scapegoat, Iran, they succeeded in a more ambitious effort to create a problem for justifying a solution. Satan's New World Order to the rescue. After the event of 9/11, there was a declared quote unquote war on terror, which the world controllers claimed justification for by blaming an innocent party, the nation of Iran, because they stopped accepting the US dollar for payment of their oil exportation and began to trade in euros. They were punished by the Illuminati when blamed for the Twin Tower destruction. In truth, Iran and bin Laden had absolutely nothing to do with it. I never thought they had anything to do with it. And like I said, I'm not that political, but I'm somewhat intuitive. Documentation exists to prove all of the above claims. Yet, even without documentation, these intuitively obvious conclusions logically follow from today's controlled media headlines. Whatever the Illuminati owned media reports is usually a lie, or at best, a half truth to serve the globalists' interests. The so called New World Order is about to emerge into the world scene. Now, again, this book is dated 2014. It's 10 years ago. This book is 10 years old, and he's speaking on this 10 years ago. The high level Illuminati Luciferians who direct the political, economic, and religious affairs of the world realize that in order to subjugate 7 billion people to the dictates of a single individual via a unified world government, it is first necessary to dismantle any semblance of a nation once grounded in the highest ideals of Christianity. And that is exactly what they've been doing. They're turning boys into girls, girls into boys, taking parental rights away from them. It's just absolutely horrendous. I mean, they unalived my mother in a hospital during the CV, and she didn't have it. She tested negative twice, and they unalived her anyway. They treated her with the protocol that unalived millions of people across the country and actually the world. Presently, they have already achieved that goal. Stage two is now in progress. That was in 2014. Stage two is now in progress, and it consists of a global movement to replace the world's three major religions: Protestant Christianity, Islam, and Hinduism, with a global culture inculcated with Luciferian witchcraft doctrine. See, I've been telling people for years, since New Jersey, I've been telling people it's witchcraft. Nobody believes me. It is witchcraft. Into that culture will spawn their new so-called New World Order government, made possible by international acts of terrorism planned by the Illuminati terrorists. Except for a very small number of true Christians in America today, the people have already succumbed to the controlled media promoting terrorism as a vehicle to induce an entire nation to forfeit their rights for the promise of security. It is now only a matter of time before Western culture is drowned in the NWO deluge of political and religious propaganda. Long before the Twin Towers collapsed into a heap of rubble, world political leaders, all of whom are members of the International Brotherhood Witches Coven of Illuminated Freemasonry. See, this is it. It's the International Brotherhood Witches Coven of Illuminated Freemasonry, had prepared documents designed to address the urgent need for government intervention that would be needed to guard against future terrorist attacks. Virtually overnight, there came into existence the USA Patriot Act, the Homeland Defense Act, the Modern Emergency Health Powers Act, and an arsenal of other unconstitutional legislation intended to nullify many of the remaining guaranteed freedoms U.S. citizens previously retained. Following 9/11, in a diabolical sleight of hand, the Washington, D.C. District of Criminals instantaneously created laws to transform America into a Gestapo police state of shackled slaves obedient to their cruel masters. Legislation such as the Homeland Defense Act and Patriot Acts 1 and 2 were created to give the CF Luciferians the necessary leverage to completely strip U.S. Constitution of its former powers to protect and defend the rights of citizens. With these communist laws, the war of the invisible terrorists, quote unquote, against the people of America were made official. But the sad irony is that only the terrorists the American people need to be defended against is the mysterious untouchables, the super government Illuminati that functions through a system of buffers, of which the United Nations and the United States federal government represent merely one layer within the buffer zone. One layer. So this is deep, deep, deep. It's like an octopus with tentacles everywhere. This is scary. This is very scary stuff. To be mocked and insulated and not realize it is the highest form of ignorance. But that is the consequence of people who despise the God of 1611 King James Bible, the people with no desire to know the truth, and who remain willfully ignorant concerning national and world affairs that directly affects them and their future generations of children. Consequently, affluent, middle-class America has no future. And what is more, they're not aware. They sold their former freedom for a pretense of safety. It is exactly what the criminal fraternity globalists hope for, a godless society of 325 million apathetic, non-critical thinking, TV dumbed down, Bible illiterate people lacking the godly character and discernment to be outraged by an injustice. That is why the criminal fraternity Luciferians boldly use words and phrases that thinly veil their seething contempt for the common citizens and indeed all of humanity. Words like patriot, homeland defense, security, mocking words, phrases, and slogans intended to shame and deride people who lack the discernment to even know that they're being mocked. Such arrogance would be perceived as derogatory by anyone with even a modicum of discernment, yet, as testimony to the advanced degree of mind control Americans, they're not even capable of comprehending that they're being insulted. Instead, the people wave flags, idolatry, and chant simple-minded slogans like, God bless America. What they fail to realize, what the truth God-hating citizens of America do not understand, is that they're under the judgment wrath of Almighty God. God allowed 9/11 to occur. He permitted Satan's criminal fraternity to destroy 3,000 lives and lied to the American people. He granted the CF license to decimate a once blessed nation. God has permitted Lucifer to transform America into a satanic society, a cesspool culture, where children are taught Harry Potter witchcraft in schools, and where their scripturally ignorant, morally depraved parents are their enablers. America has become a nation that trusts in its demonic leaders. They believe what they see on television. Their minds are programmed to respond to media stimuli. They're numb with disinformation, warped by today's ghoulish culture glorifying death and destruction. Because of their wickedness and willful ignorance, God will not bless America, and neither will he protect the U.S. from foreign invasion. Instead, he has cursed an entire nation. God will no longer show favor upon the people that despises 1611 KJV Bible and embraces witchcraft, a culture that hates Jesus Christ and loves its Luciferian leaders. Because the people have forgotten the God of their ancestors, God has forgotten them. Hosea 4:6. My people are destroyed for lack of knowledge, because thou hast rejected knowledge. I will also reject thee, that thou shalt be no priest to me. Seeing thou hast forgotten the law of thy God, I will also forget thy children. God has allowed wicked, vile men to come into power and rule over them. He has not hindered the criminal fraternity from visiting ruin upon the American people, and soon the grinning stooges in government will demand their very souls. The future of America portends increasingly more government acts of terrorism, staged warfare upon the citizenry, which should make it obvious that America is no longer a free country ruled by constitutional law, but rather has become a dictatorship founded upon the principles of the Communist Manifesto. Presently, the leadership of the United States consists of communist installed Lucifer worshipping elitists, traitorous politicians in Congress and the Senate that are mind controlled Manchurian candidates whose silence and cooperation is assured because they have been compromised by personal indiscretions and they are afraid of those who control them. Therefore, take heed, America, the global Luciferians who staged the 9/11 terrorist attack debacle, they're laughing in your collective face, only you're too spiritually blind to realize it because you have rejected the way, the truth, and the life. John 14:6, Jesus Christ, and instead believe the media lies. He has cut you off and taken away your ability to know the truth. No, all you can do is grope in the darkness while trusting what you see on TV. You have been deceived, lied to, and believe the demented mutterings of staged politicians masquerading as your quote unquote savior. You believe in man's corrupt government instead of the righteous government of God, and for that you're condemned to a life of ignorance and slavery. As of 9/11, Americans' doom has been permanently sealed. There's no going back as a nation. The Illuminati criminal fraternity has been given the spiritual right to oppress and put into bondage a people that have forgotten God. Presently, at this time of government tyranny and terrorism, the few remaining righteous voices in America have their own 9/11. He that dwelleth in the secret place of the Most High shall abide under the shadow of the Almighty. Psalm 91:1. Agenda 21. Immediately subsequent to 9/11, a once free nation was transformed into an Orwellian 1984 police state. Soon, every U.S. citizen will be forced to submit to being injected with a vaccine containing a highly toxic metals of mercury and aluminum and brain neuron destroying aspartame and MSG, as well as live, I can't say the word, the C word, cells, active disease cultures from the AIDS virus, hepatitis B, smallpox, anthrax, and other biologically transmitted disease vectors, which the Luciferian monsters have concocted for inoculating the entire world population with sickness, disease, and death. In 1992, during an organized crime syndicate meeting in Rio de Janeiro, the Earth Summit convened with a fraternity of key Illuminati quote unquote frontmen who drafted the Earth Charter in the form of a massive government document, some 40 chapters in length, detailing the various ways and means by which the criminal fraternity terrorists intend to enslave people of the world in a global surveillance grid that will abolish personal privacy, constitutional freedoms, and ownership of private property. Among the focal issues described in Agenda 21 are strategies and technologies already being implemented for mass terrorism intended to bring the entire world population into submission under the Antichrist's global governance. In current usage for achieving that objective, the following, the lines in the sky, electromagnetic microwave frequency, pulsed energy transmissions, microwave towers, the musical harp, disease causing jabbies, genetically modified processed foods, genetically modified organisms, global satellites, GPS tracking, surveillance drone aircraft, ubiquitous surveillance cameras on every street corner, national ID biometric cards, and the mark of the beast, human implantation RFID, radio frequency identifier, computer chip technology, subdermal implants. This is not science fiction, but a present reality, and it's happening now. That was in 2014. Items purchased from Walmart department stores are tagged with RFID chips, remotely monitored to track you all the way back to your home. There was a woman on TikTok who found these chips in her Victoria's Secret bras. Yeah, she posted this on TikTok. That's why they want to ban TikTok. Yes. RFID chips in your bras, ladies. Take a look. These few examples are only the beginning of the Hitler Aryan nightmare awaiting a population of dazed and confused Americans under siege by the unrelenting assault of the global criminal fraternity. According to the original Earth Charter document, Agenda 21 is a comprehensive plan of action to be taken globally, nationally, and locally by organizations of the United Nations system, governments, and major groups in every area in which humans impact on the environment. Environmentalism is one of the main false flag rallying points by the Luciferian globalists for creating a spurious sense of urgency, a catastrophic phobic by a series of government staged crises. And we have been seeing a lot of these staged crises recently, right? Something going on in Ohio. What about all those train derailments? And now the invaders. I don't call them immigrants. They're not immigrating. They're invading. They're invading our country. It's all a plan. The clear and stated objective of Satan's people, all of those functioning within broad banner of human civil government, is to implement further quote unquote controls by cataloging the global population in a planetary data bank in order for them to be more effectively monitored and eliminated. The Illuminati Brotherhood have traditionally used manufactured environmental crises to promote their witchcraft agenda of Mother Earth worship globalism. Agenda 21 is the globalist blueprint for bringing the world under the rule of their Antichrist world leader. It is the plan, quote unquote, which past Luciferians such as Theosophist Helena Blavatsky often made reference to in her demon-channeled writings, much like the infamous protocols of the learned elders of Zion. Agenda 21 is the updated, modern version of the plan, which outlines the globalist plot to divide North American continent into 10 biosphere regions where human habitation is severely restricted. Prior to the present, the CF Luciferians lacked the necessary means to control all peoples of the world, but in today's computer age, they finally have the technology to monitor and control virtually every individual on the planet. Satan has always used deception to gain control over human beings. It worked in the Garden of Eden, it worked in Nazi Germany, and it's working now in today's New World Order of false flag police state America and throughout the rest of the modern world. Satan's human servants are easily deceived by causes that superficially appear to be necessary, beneficial, and perhaps even benevolent. Those who reject the truth and believe the lie are easy prey for the silver-tongued politicians that strive to control them. As a former Illuminati-appointed CF political tyrant once stated, 1935 will go down in history for the first time as a civilized nation has full gun registration. Our streets will be safer, our police more efficient, and the world will follow our lead into the future. The masses applauded Adolf Hitler when he made that statement. Soon thereafter, the Third Reich took over and enslaved the entire population of Germany. The globalists are following Hitler's script for establishing a worldwide police state. In America today, Hitler's prediction has come true. Gun registration and subsequent confiscation of citizens' firearms is among the top priorities of the world controllers. For they know that without an armed citizenry, there can be no resistance to their tyranny. And terrorism is big business. The criminal fraternity realized that there is far more money to be made in the destruction industry than can be made in the construction industry. Government orchestrated acts of terrorism destroy not only physical, tangible assets, large buildings that instantly crumble to the ground upon detonation with planted explosives timed to coincide with jetliner collisions, but also of another kind of government asset, people. For instance, oh my goodness, do the arm candy with people with doses containing mercury, aluminum, and live cells. You know, those arm shots. And the MFC pharmaceutical cartel will net billions of dollars just from the increase in doctors' pharmaceutical prescriptions. Prolonging illnesses induced by, the lines in the sky, chronic symptomology enables madmen who run the world to reap massive windfall profit from the resulting human misery and unaliving. Their objective is to stricken the world's people with sickness and disease and to terrorize them with manufactured crises in order to break their will and force them to succumb to their tyranny. When the citizen population is too weak and too terrified to resist the criminal fraternity, these people will submit to any form of oppression that promises relief and safety from the terrorists, quote unquote. The federal government's $10 billion a year terrorism defense fund is the dangling carrot that has caused a stampede among thousands of government and non-government organizations competing to help fight terrorism. A nation under siege by invisible terrorists needs to be carefully watched and monitored. The frightened people need to be protected. They need to register their guns and be identified with microchips, and a benevolent government is concerned for the health of its people, especially when that health is being intentionally sabotaged by toxic chemicals and biologically engineered disease causing microorganisms that may, quote unquote, just somehow find their way into the air and the food and the water supply. All of this terrorism demands a solution. Someone just has to make surveillance cameras, produce RFID chips and biometric scanners. State and municipal payrolls need to be increased to allow for the need for more police and their militarized weaponry to protect the citizens, of course. And then there's a very urgent requirement for more prisons because no civilized society can be safe from the threat of terrorism unless all the millions of terrorists are locked up in maximum security federal concentration camps on demand. Manufactured terrorism requires goods and services provided by the government corporate contractors, and not surprisingly, billions of dollars of government contract money is a strong incentive for motivating patriotic sentiments among the terrorism industry. Everything's a lie. How is it possible for less than 1/1000th of 1% of the world population to be able to control the other 99.9999%? In order to answer this question, the first thing to consider is that whatever you hear from the government through their disinformation filter, the media, is a lie. Everything is a well constructed lie or a series of lies to cover up the previous lies that have been exposed. It's the method of choice implemented by legal organized crime. Without the lie, the criminal fraternity could not survive. The media, CNN, MSNBC, Fox News, Hollywood, government slogans like the war on terrorism, Luciferian ideology is the government is God, obey the government, are some of the means in which legal criminals obtain their desired goals. The tiered structure in which modern legalistic societies are organized, federal, state, district, city, requires citizen subservience to a higher human authority, promoting the belief that a class of ruling elites are necessary for the good of society. This is for educational purposes only, YouTube. I'm reading a book. A judicial system consisting of Freemasonry judges and police enforcers must violate the Constitution by acting as revenue collectors to fund the fraudulent court operation and thus enable its continuance for terrorizing its citizenry. Individual members of the criminal fraternity operating within this corrupt system serve as spokespersons to validate the criminal contrivance known as human civil government. Even though they themselves are legally sanctioned criminals operating under the umbrella of the elite's power structure, they are given credibility by the media in the eyes of those whom they oppress. In order to maintain this illusion, there must be a body of disinformation to support such a colossal fabrication. An organization that uses force or the threat of force to achieve its ends must be made to appear righteous and benevolent. Otherwise, those whom it oppresses may rebel. This is the nature of the lie. The LCF is steeped in layer upon layer of falsehoods, distorted truths, and planned deceit regarding the true nature of man and his relation to God, that man is a free will agent accountable only to the laws of God. The criminal fraternity, in order to perpetuate its system of lies and counterfeit authority, buries this truth under a mountain of documents, laws, ordinances, and sanctions against human freedom. It's a Ponzi scheme to usurp freedoms and liberty granted to the individuals by their creator, God. The supra-government Illuminati world bankers dictate policies to the lower tier governmental body for entrapping the masses in their money recycling scheme that absconds material wealth from the people, which then is used for funding programs to enslave them. This cleverly orchestrated lie is given the cover story that the people must maintain the burgeoning machinery of an oppressive system in order to be protected and feel safe from outside threats. But that's another lie. The reality is there are no external threats. There's only one threat of legal criminals masquerading as legitimate, righteous government. They substitute themselves as saviors in place of the only true savior, Jesus Christ. So, who are the real terrorists? The wicked plotteth against the just and ganasheth upon him with his teeth. Psalm 37:12. The real terrorists are not some imaginary fears of clandestine foreign intrigue planted in the minds of somnambulistic Americans by federal agents of disinformation, such as the government controlled media, but rather they are the premier terrorist organization. It's the federal government of the United States of America under the direct commands and control of the upper echelon Illuminati Luciferian super government. While the media promotes the potential threat of an outside attack upon America, plying the naive masses with intellect insulting disinformation and misinformation and bold faced lies, the Washington, D.C. District of Criminals, D.C. District of Criminals, are busy managing their 100 billion a year terrorist racketeering operation, blowing up government buildings, dumbing lines in the sky, bio warfare agents in the sky, spraying us with disease causing pesticides and pathogens in response to non existing insect vectors, West Nile virus, H1N1, bird flu, swine flu. It's yet another government hoax, forcing their disease laden jabbies upon infants and newborns, spawning deadly illnesses in their pharmaceutical labs to inoculate the masses with previously unheard strains of deadly and chronic wasting diseases in the name of public health, stealing private property, raiding the homes of peaceful citizens, terrorizing constitutionally guaranteed freedom to travel motorists, ritually sacrificing infants in their mother's womb, prohibiting children from being homeschooled, forcibly taking children from their home, demanding coward citizens to pay an unconstitutional federal income tax under the threat of life prison sentence, and much, much more. They create acts of terror that con the trusting public into allowing their constitutional freedoms to be taken away. They destroy us while claiming to help us. They unalive us with a promise and a smile. The only rational conclusion that a thinking person can arrive at from all this madness is that the real terrorists are the genocidal maniacs who are at the upper level criminal fraternity Satanists pulling the strings of the talking heads commonly known as politicians. The real terrorists are able to convince the people that they're benevolent masters and that anyone who questions or opposes them is dangerous, a quote unquote, a terrorist, a quote unquote, a threat to national security. Like me, a 66-year-old woman walking down my driveway, I get labeled a terror threat by the Manalapan Police Department. Oh my goodness. Oh no, I was 60 at the time. I was labeled a terror threat for walking on my driveway. Oh my goodness. Well, anyway, none of the wicked shall understand. Daniel 12:10. Therefore, a demented mob of government political terrorists are able to coerce or deceive the general public that has lost its discernment by an act of God. The Thessalonians 2:9-12. Just as the Illuminati is in the business of creating their own mind controlled slaves among themselves, so too Their lower level CF functionaries in national governments use mind control propaganda to great advantage as a brainwashing technique implemented against the citizenry to make them mind controlled slaves, the servants of the lie, condition people to think that anyone who does not agree with their propaganda slogans is an enemy of the state, and that anyone who is not an unconscionable, remorseless despiser of the truth, like them, is a terrorist. This twisted piece of logic is met with vacant expressions and apathetic nods from the doped up, dumbed down, dull witted populace of America. The spiritually blind American public believes every word of what they hear on television or read in the newspapers. Consequently, few people today are able to identify the criminal fraternity as the liars, the thieves, the murderers that they truly are. The criminally insane are running the American asylum, and their controlled mass media is working overtime to instill in the public a broadening of the definition of exactly what constitutes a terrorist. In fact, the satanic hierarchy has passed down to police departments throughout the nation a list of characteristics for profiling the various types of individuals who fall within the scope of quote unquote dangerous enemies of the state. For instance, all of those who criticize the government or believe in the Bill of Rights are considered a serious threat to the establishment of the Illuminati's world dictatorship. They are the terrorists. Anyone who believes in the Holy Bible or the second return of Jesus Christ is a terrorist. Anyone who upholds the First Amendment freedom of speech rights or the Second Amendment rights is a terrorist. Parents who homeschool their children, oh yeah, they're also terrorists. All citizen gun owners are terrorists. Okay, so folks, guys, just so you know, that means that every one of my neighbors is a terrorist because every one of my neighbors are gun shooting terrorists. That's for sure. In fact, the whole state of Kentucky, kids here know how to shoot a weapon. I kid you not. 10-year-olds know how to shoot a weapon here in Kentucky. So that's why Kentucky is screwed. That's why I need to get out of I need to get out of Kentucky. All citizen gun owners are terrorists. Defenders of the Constitution are terrorists. In fact, the Patriot Act, one, makes any crime whatsoever, no matter how minor, even the first degree misdemeanor, is an act of terrorism that can result in the death penalty. Is that nuts? I'm hearing this for the first time. Just so you know, I'm reading this for the first time. I'm hearing this for the first time. I guess I'm one of those dumbed down Americans who is clueless. Okay? I was clueless. I never learned this. Patriot Act 2 states that any citizen who violates a local, state, or federal law is also a terrorist. All Luciferian members constituting the global super government are get this. Okay, this is important. This is extremely important, okay? All Luciferian members constituting the global super government, they're exempt. They are exempt. They are exempt from being terrorists. They're exempt. They are exempt, okay? So in Satan's New World Order Patriot Act society, the only non-terrorists are the criminal fraternity and their government employees. You hear that? The Antichrist global police state will consist of only two groups of people: government drones, drones, and citizen slaves. There are to be none who can think for themselves and act independently. Anyone who upholds the truth and is willing to stand up and risk persecution and possible imprisonment and death for what the truth is a threat to national security and thus is a terrorist, a right wing extremist, otherwise known as Christians. conspiracy theorists and constitutional patriots are labeled enemy combatants, quote unquote, or domestic terrorists. Scripturally, righteous individuals are perceived by government. Oh my goodness. They're perceived by government serial unalivers as a threat to the global establishment of Luciferian New World Order. The servants of the lie, like their master Satan, the father of the lie, thrive on deceit, creating chaos, confusion, and misery. You know, misery loves company. That's what they say. Misery loves company. They're crafty, but they're not wise. They're formidable, but they're not invincible. For they are vulnerable to the most powerful weapon in the universe, the truth. Yeah, they are. They cower in the name of truth. This is why they cannot show their faces like around here. Oh, and anyway, since everybody around here owns a weapon, they're already considered to be terrorists. Okay? So they were terrorists before anyone else around here became one because they already had the weapons. Oh my goodness. So, what the various members of the criminal fraternity brotherhood fear the most is exposure. You hear that? They fear the truth and exposure. They absolutely hate having the light shined upon their evil deeds. I don't know, that kind of reminds me, this is the kind of vampire-ish, you know, the vampire only comes out at night. And it's for this reason they carefully censor and control the flow of information to the docile masses, making sure to brainwash them with their Luciferian agenda and mind control them into believing that anything seen or heard on television or read in the newspapers is representative of reality. Helpful and informative alternative sources of truthful information, such as this book, and those listed in the references. Oh, and by the way, the references in this book are phenomenal. Like they're pages and pages and pages, which could possibly raise some people out of their as abysmal level of ignorance and denial, are kept out of the bookstores and off the library shelves by unwitting agents of the LCF. In contrast, publications promoting the New World Order, Luciferian agenda, Satanism, witchcraft, Eastern philosophies, sexual immorality, the unaliving of children, pseudo Christianity, etc. They're maintained and readily supplied in every distribution outlet. So, since the Illuminati Luciferians control all mainstream media sources and nearly all other means of information exchange, their hidden agenda thus remains unknown to the general public. In the unlikely event that any truth should somehow inadvertently leak to the public, it will have no effect upon a nation that is contemptuous of the truth. Well, that's really interesting. That is a very strong commentary. I'll read it again. In the unlikely event that any truth should somehow inadvertently leak to the public, it will have no effect upon a nation that is contemptuous of the truth. As Alexander Solzhenitsyn astutely observed, it is most difficult to free slaves from the chains they worship. Spiritually dead Americans love and worship their chains. This book is written for those who can receive the truth, made open blind eyes to perceive the reality that the criminal fraternity terrorists will not discover until mere seconds after they die. And that is the greatest terrorist of all is Jesus Christ. So anyway, we're just over an hour, and I've got to get my birds, my animals fed and to bed in their coops and stuff. That actually ends chapter 1. The next is chapter 2. Chapter 2 is human programming and mind control. And let me see how long that is, because I'll probably do another live because my phone won't accept all of this information. Yeah, so I'll do another live, and I will read chapter 2, Human Programming and Mind Control. It's actually quite long, so I'll have to eat a little bit of honey, which, by the way, these criminals, I have a penchant for honey. Like, I love honey. Like, I collect honey. Like, I love all different flavors of honey. Well, mostly. I had one flavored honey that I did not like at all. I bought a blueberry honey thinking, well, I love blueberries. I love honey. It's got to be delicious. It tasted disgusting. So these criminals, I opened up a new honey. It's a whipped honey. It's a very expensive honey. So it's whipped. So at the top of the honey, it's got this layer of whipped. It's like whipped cream. It's delicious. And I savor it by kind of dipping into the edge and not not disturbing the top layer. Well, these effers, this is the second time they've done that. They go into my honey and they scoop off the top layer. These people are disgusting. They disgust me. So yeah, so they get into my food. So anyway, I'm going to have to eat a little bit of honey for chapter 2 because actually this is actually I'm actually deeply disturbed by reading this. I will admit this is very disturbing. I almost don't want to read it. Especially as a targeted person. I mean, it's bad enough, I mean, for people to hear this as a non-targeted person, but knowing that this stuff is real and being targeted and being hit with energy weapons and having my animals poisoned and their eyes being torn out of their head and my legs vibrating and my clothes being poisoned with chemicals, this is all deeply disturbing because it's true. Okay, it's all true. It's true. So thank you, Billy, for anybody who is still in the chat here. I'm going to end this live stream. This will be posted. There wasn't a lot of interaction between people, so this will be very easy for people to just listen to because I'm reading it straight outright. And once again, what I'm reading is a book, a hardcover book. It's a very rare book. It's not no longer available on Amazon. And actually, I tried to look for it. I couldn't find it. I purchased it. It cost $35 at the time. It's called The Criminal Fraternity, Servants of the Lie. Servants of the Truth is Jesus Christ by a pseudonym, Soul, Soul, Esprit, Esprit. It was published in 2014. I just completed chapter 1. The next time I do a live reading, I will read straight through chapter 2. And I'll have to, obviously, I'll have to put aside at least, I'm going to say at least another hour, possibly more. Oh no, you know what? I'm looking at it. I don't, it might not even, well, it'll probably take another hour before I get to chapter 3. And chapter 3 is the legal criminal fraternity. Oh, this is going to be a good one. I can't wait till we get to chapter 3. Police, attorneys, judges, and politicians. Okay, that's going to be a doozy. We'll save that for another time, chapter 3, because you know what? I watch too many cop auditing videos. I get my little knickers in a knot and get really pissed off. So anyway, that's the end of chapter 1. Thank you for whomever was in the chat listening. I'm going to sign off for now. I will find a cute little thumbnail to make it look like it's going to be a good read. And I will talk to you guys soon.